I'm going to do another conference on another one of my obsessions, which is the country of Iceland. I chose this subject because I was sort of stuck, and I realised that quite a few of my friends didn't know much about the place, so I'm trying to educate at the same time. So, basics, Iceland is a little country at the top of Europe, in the Arctic Circle, which is in between the American and the European continental plates. So it's pretty small and it's very, very sparsely populated. So what I have gathered from intensive research is what everybody knows about Iceland is firstly Eyjafjallajökull, which is the volcano that went off in 2010 and stopped all the flights in Europe, and Bardarbunga, which went off last year and caused much havoc. But there's much more to Iceland than just a couple of volcanoes. Firstly, there's over 25 active volcanoes in Iceland, but that's besides the point. So a few little interesting facts. The population of about 323,000, which is not even as big as Toulouse. It's about a third of the size of Toulouse. But the area is 103,000 square kilometres, which is pretty big. The current head of state is a president called Oliver Ragnar Grimsson. They don't use the euro as they're not yet in Europe, so they keep having debates. So their money is still the Icelandic krona. The climate, even though it's up in the Arctic Circle, it's not actually necessarily that cold, it's very temperate. Right, so that is Iceland's flag since 1944 when they became independent from Denmark. There's a nice picture of Reykjavik, which is home to 40% of the entire population. And their national animal is the puffin, although there's quite a debate at the moment because they're going extinct and they're trying to stop that. Okay, I got to do a bit of history. Iceland is very famous for all of its literature, which means it has a very well documented history, all the way back to about the year 700 or 800. So, in the very beginning, there were Celtic monks which settled there, and they looking for new land. They came from Ireland and Scotland, and they lived there for about 100 years, and then they left again. But later on, the Swedish explorer Vikings came there and they discovered it, and one of them settled there in Reykjavik, near Reykjavik. And afterwards it was disputed a lot between Norway and Denmark, and the Scandinavian countries kept forming, joining each other and separating from each other all the time, and it was just passed from pillar to post, and the end of the story ended up being stuck with Denmark for a very, very long time. In the Middle Ages, it had quite a few problems. There were several volcanic eruptions, which caused all the ash and the dust, which it fell on the farm animals and the crops. So there was famines, and there was no meat and no food, and lots of suffering. The Black Death actually came there twice, and each time it wiped out half of the population. So by the end of all this, there was really not many people left up there. So it was under Danish rule until 1944, after the end of the war, when Denmark realised they needed to get rid of some of the excess. And since then, they've developed many different areas such as fishing and geothermal energy. In the 1970s, there were the Cod Wars with England, when England and Iceland started fighting over who was going to fish where. It's very short, but I think there was quite a few incidents. Right, so Reykjavik is the capital, and probably one of the only Icelandic towns worth mentioning because the rest of them are so tiny. So it was founded in the year 870, and the name Reykjavik actually means smoky bay, because the day they arrived in the boat it was really foggy, and they were very imaginative when it came to naming things. So it's right in the bottom corner there, and it's really not terribly big. See it very well on the right here. So that's the Alþingi, which is the Icelandic parliament, which it's called the Alþingi because when the Vikings lived there, they had their own parliament, which was more egalitarian than most are today, and they called that the Alþingi, and they've kept the same system going all these years. Right, so it's famous for its nightlife and culture. There's lots of big music festivals, and that's a concert hall they built a few years ago, which is absolutely huge. Okay, and there's a huge church in the centre called the Hallgrímskirkja, which was, I can't remember when it was built exactly, it was in the Middle Ages. Outside it stands a statue of Leifur Eriksson. Well, I suppose, has everybody heard of Eric the Red? No? Or what he did? Okay, okay, never mind, I'll explain. Eric the Red was an Icelander who killed a few people and pissed off a lot of people. So he was exiled to Greenland. And that's actually why Greenland's called Greenland, because he was lonely and he was trying to sell it to people, because it's not green at all. But he went there, and Lever Eriksson is his son. And he didn't kill as many people, but he sailed all the way to America. He discovered America and the Indians. Then he got bored and went home, but he's remembered for that, so they commemorated him with the statue. So, like I said earlier, the main...
I'm sorry, we had a list glitch. The student was on the list, and actually we didn't see her, so she can come in.
Yeah, of course, there's a seat there.
Thank you.
Never mind, I'll carry on. So, they're doing lots of work with all the geothermal energy, because they, like I said, they've got 25 active volcanoes and thousands of geysers. So they have, you see, all different active fields. No, that's not what I wanted. Ow! We'll get to that in a minute. I'm saving this bit for afterwards. I start with the boring stuff. Yeah, so over 60% of all the energy in Iceland is produced by geothermal energy, which they make themselves, so it's therefore 100% clean. And I know that they're planning for the future to have a gigantic undersea cable from Iceland to mainland Europe, so they can sell us the excess of what they produce, so we can use their energy as well. Right, if you want to do... Ah, come on. Okay. Right, music time. I thought I had to include something. So, this is a very, very old song called Olafur Liljuros, which is about a guy who meets some elves, and depending which version, he either gets killed or gets home and his family is killed as well. Okay, the sound is apparently working, so let's play the beginning for you. That's the part I put on the presentation. Oh, it's very long, it goes on for a long time. So sorry, this is last time. Right, okay, now we get to the fun part. Because I read a newspaper called the Reykjavik Grapevine, which is always full of these excellent stories that come out of Iceland. First one is in Iceland, during June last year, there was a guy who decided he was going to cycle naked around Reykjavik. Naturally, he was arrested, but the police thought this was a good idea to make a driving campaign to make drivers more aware of cyclists on the road. And I will I can show you. It's quite funny, and also it gives you an idea of what their language sounds like.
Munið að horfa í speglana, annars vitið ekki af hverju þið missið. Hugsið hjónamennin. Hægt að fá upplýsingar nýmiða á fib.is.
So the title Huli Huga means bike in line, so think about bikes. Okay, animation didn't work. Right, okay, more weird stuff that comes out of Iceland that you've probably actually heard of is about elves and their inability to either deny or confirm the existence of. Recently they were trying to build a road, and some news reporters came to film it, the cameras stopped working, and the diggers and everything stopped working, so they realised it was because of elves. They eventually had to bring in elf communicators to resolve the problem. Here are some other examples. There's a guy who wanted to move this rock out of his garden, but apparently it belonged to the elves. Every time he tried to move it, the machinery would fail or something, just one bad thing after another, so he decided to keep it and make it into a feature instead. Here's a piece of road where there's rocks there, you can see. And the road was supposed to go through where those rocks are, but apparently they also belong to elves, so they had to be convinced to let them go around the edge. And same for that other rock there in the house. Basically, don't touch rocks in Iceland because they probably don't belong to you. So they used to be used in fairy tales in Iceland to stop children being naughty. Don't do this or the elves will take you. Actually, elf is not what we're supposed to call them. It's actually a pejorative term. It isn't very nice. It's supposed to call them huldufolk. But because they were so mean, they ended up having pejorative names. They seem to live in an invisible parallel, well, I can gather, kind of a parallel dimension, which is usually within rocks and caves and that sort of thing. And on certain nights of the year, apparently if you're gifted, you can see them walking around special times. Okay, one more weird thing. During the credit crunch in 2009, when Iceland basically lost all its money, McDonald's did used to be in Iceland, but they decided to leave. So one man bought the last ever McDonald's and is now on display in the museum with a live webcam feed at all times. So I think we can probably see what it looks like right now if you want. Does anyone see a 6-year-old hamburger? Behold. The last hamburger sold in Iceland, if you're ever really bored on the internet. This one, quite a few people have heard of as well. This is the Icelandic Philological Museum. Does anybody recognise which part, what the word philological is made of?
Phallus.
It's a collection of over 200 different penises from over 93 different species, including human, whale, polar bear, walrus, and something else, like dogs and cats. As well as various memorabilia such as ornaments and carvings and such. It's run by this guy, and it's near Reykjavik, and it's a very big tourist attraction. Fun fact, there are actually over twice as many sheep as people in Iceland. There's currently about 800,000 sheep. There was only, 323,000 people. So, but I guess they roam in the big empty parts, so there's plenty of them. One fun fact, alcohol was forbidden in Iceland from 1915, well, alcohol generally was from 1915 to about 1940, but beer was banned until 1989. And there used to be a black market between fishermen that would go over to Norway or to England and they would sneak back beer. But, old habits die hard because even today, apparently Iceland is the European country that drinks the least beer. It just drinks the most other stuff, I suppose. It's one of Europe's drunkest countries, but it doesn't consume the most beer. So I guess I'm finding other sources. These are the police of Reykjavik. It's 20% of them are women, and they have a very, very low crime rate. So they seem to spend a lot of their time on Instagram, which is weird. But there's an average in Iceland of 1 murder per year, and the police have only ever shot a person once, which was 2 years ago, last year, I can't remember. Only because he was shooting at them, it was more like self-defense than like the Americans do. Even when they did it, the country went to national mourning for a whole day, and they came out and apologised to everybody. It was, yeah. There are a few famous people in Iceland. You might know some of these. Anybody who knows Game of Thrones is probably familiar with the Mountain. Mm-hmm. He's an Icelander, and he's also Europe's strongest man. Probably why he doesn't talk much in the films. I don't know why. Another one that everybody knows about is Bjork. she's a singer and she's a little bit weird. Her music sounds very odd. Apparently it's electric, ethereal, pop, and some other adjectives I can't remember. But she stars in her own films, she's been in various bands, and she's an eco-warrior. At the moment she's got a petition going to help protect the Icelandic the nature reserves, because the government wants to develop on them. The more singers are Sigur Rós, which also have quite odd music, very ethereal is the best word for them. And they sing in a language that they made up, which is a mixture of English and Icelandic. They call it Hopelandic or Vonlenska. So most of the music is a bit odd. Well, the one is Ólafur Arnalds, who is another musician, but he does music for TV shows and films. He's won some BAFTA awards as well as some others, and he did work on the British series Broadchurch and in the Hunger Games. I can't remember which film, but I think it's the first one he did music for. There's so much difference as well. Right, she's not much of a celebrity, but she was the first female head of state in elected head of state in Europe. She's Vigdis Finnbogadóttir. And she was the first female president, which caused, I don't know if it caused that much of a fuss, to be honest. They're pretty open-minded up there. And speaking of which, Iceland, there was a study done about equality, such as gender pay gaps, treatment of women compared to men. Iceland came out on top with all the other Nordic countries. France isn't even on the list. That's sad. And the current Prime Minister, Johanna Sigurdardóttir, she was the first openly lesbian person to head a government. Right, food. Some of you may have eaten, some of you may not. I apologise for those who have. This is their national dish, which is fermented shark meat. They take a shark and they put it in a container of urine, and they leave it sit for ages and ages until all the bacteria that would likely have killed you is also dead. Apparently it smells a bit like pee when you eat it. That's what they're famous for, and it's not, from what I understand, it is not for the faint-hearted. And then it's like a selection, we do have some good food as well. This is called skyr, which is like a really, really thick yogurt that you leave it to drain for about 12 hours. And they eat it with savoury and sweet. You can have it with jam or porridge for breakfast, or eat it with fish as well for savoury meals. Which is one of the bigger exports at the moment. They've recently started exporting it to Denmark and the United Kingdom. There were some copyright issues. This is another food which I knew as a child as well. It's fish oil. It's not really food, it's more of a medicine that you force on young children. But in Iceland, during the winter, the sun is out for maybe like an hour a day. So to try and make up for the vitamins they're not getting from sunlight, they drink that stuff. And I can tell you, it's absolutely disgusting. I also had to have it, it's awful. Most families have UV lights installed as well, so they can sit under them and still have vitamin D, vitamin K from the sunlight, which we don't get much of in winter. And to finish off, it's sweet. So in most Scandinavian countries, they have an obsession with licorice. After extensive research and talking to some Icelanders, nearly all of their sweets have licorice hidden in them somewhere. That's chocolate-covered licorice, that's balls of licorice, that's balls of crunchy chocolate with licorice. I think they have a problem. In fact, they like it so much that they even managed to make an alcohol of licorice, licorice liqueur or something, which was apparently very popular. But okay, I figured it's December. It's not December yet. It's November, but from what the shops are saying, it's nearly Christmas. So I thought I'd do a bit on Christmas in Iceland. So they do it on, like in France, on 24th at midnight. They will give each other presents, and but they don't have Father Christmas like we know him. They have 13 sort of Father Christmases. You know how Father Christmas, if you're good, you get presents, and if not, you get a lump of coal or a potato. It's the same principle. They will give you fruit or sweets, and if you've been bad, then you'll give you a potato. And like in France, they put it in your shoe as well. But they're not the nice, benevolent characters that Father Christmas is. They come from children's stories that were made up to stop children from being naughty, basically. So there's one that arrives each day between between 7th, 12th, 20th, 24th, and they stay for 2 weeks, which means the last one leaves on 12th night, the 6th of January. And they're all present on Christmas, so they can all give you the sweets or potatoes. But in between, they cause trouble. The first one is Giddyjager, which translates roughly as gully gawk. He is... The second one arrives in the problem with the animation. He hides in gullies and he steals your milk if you're not careful. And there's Stekiaster is the very first one. He likes to annoy sheep, but his legs are made of wood, so it makes his job a bit tricky. Then there's Stuver, who is very, very short and licks out leftovers from cans. The main problem with these boys is they do not get fed. All they're doing is stealing various forms of food. This is Forrest Slaker. He licks your spoons, but there's not much on them, so he tends to be very thin. Potterskifittle, who steals leftovers from pots. Askalakir, who hides under your bed to steal bowls with a special kind of Icelandic bowl called an asker. Hurdaskeflir is, he slams doors. He's not after food, he just likes to scare you in the middle of the night. There's Skiergammer, who steals skier. And Geltepepper, who sneaks around doorways and uses the space to smell fun Loivebrød. Loivebrød is a special kind of bread they make in Iceland, which I guess you could only really make in Iceland. They make a bread dough and they put it on top of a sauce, like a geyser, and it's a steam that cooks the bread that way. And they make it very, very thin with patterns of like leaves on it. It's very pretty. There's Juknakrake. He hides in the rafters and he steals your sausages. Glubbegeige, he looks through your windows, so just to see if you've got anything good. And Ketpoker, which steals your meat. And the last one is Kertasneakia, who follows children to steal their candles. Because the stories from olden days when candles were made of animal fat and therefore edible. So he was so desperate he needs candles. This is one of mine. This is their mother. Who's called Grilla, which I think means threat or threatening. And she goes one step further and she eats you if you've been naughty. This is an old Icelandic painting. The manslaughter isn't over yet. She has a cat called the Yule Cat who eats people who haven't got new clothes before Christmas. So the Christmas people like to dress up in fine clothes, but if you haven't done that, then you get eaten by the cat. Right, I don't know how Christmassy you want to be, but there's the Icelandic version of Silent Night of yeah, might as well. I thought Christmas would feel closer than it does. that's it. Any questions, remarks? I'd like to clarify, I have never been to Iceland, so if anybody wants to correct me on anything, feel free. I've just observed them from afar for about 3 years.
No?
Oh, and I guess you can go then.